all my Kinvians, and welcome to a new episode of Discovering Once Upon a Time. My sincere apologies for taking so long to record this. It's just been kind of nuts lately. But, yeah, hopefully I will be doing several recordings this weekend because, I'm going to be out of town next weekend for my little sister's wedding. I'm getting old. You can already tell by the gray hair. Anyway, today, the episode I'm going to be watching is Dreamy. And based on the name, I think it's going to go one of two ways. Either one, we might get a Sleeping Beauty kind of thing, because, sleeping, dreamy. And she might be a very dreamy lady, or something. Or, much like Stealthy, we might get a different dwarf. Just, basing it entirely on the fairy tales, because, other than Doc, pretty much all of the dwarf names end with a Y, like Grumpy, Dopey, yada yada. So, that's my guess. That's my assumption on the whole thing. So, only one way to find out, and that is to begin the episode itself. So, without any further ado, let's begin Dreamy. Oh, and just so you know, on my notes, I'm going to try and structure this a little bit more. So, I'm going to try and pay attention and mark things specifically as good, aka a favorite, or bad, aka a annoyance, and then other things as well. I think you need to turn that up. Ah! Dwarves! Dwarves. It's the dwarves. Okay. Haha! The dwarves. Hi, Grumpy.
Welcome to the world, dwarf.
Okay, dwarves hatch. And he is very happy.
What a team we'd make. Town harlot, town drunk. The only person in this town that people like less than me is you. If you're coming to me, you're screwed.
Damn.
No problem at all.
Aww. Holy crap, I think that's the first time I've seen him smile, other than coming out of the egg.
Busy trying to get the lights to work that I didn't. I bet you could do anything.
He wants to do...
Don't let your kids watch it!
Nice to meet you, Leroy.
Maybe mute me saying that, Meleena.
Cats never lies, kid.
He's dreamy?
Okay, folks, grab a lantern and move out. Today is the first day of the rest.
If she was a dwarf, her name would be Clumsy. Or unlucky. Or bad lucky. One barbecued dwarf coming up. Nope.
Going to see them tonight on my way back.
Oh, sounds fun. Have a good time.
Thanks.
It's not in his head, it's in his heart.
Hell!
You're in love.
Wait, what is this?
The dwarfs can't fall in love.
At what point does this take place as opposed to skin deep? Because it seems to me, based on how she's talking, this is after skin deep. I thought that was a more recent event.
20 minutes later.
Or maybe the Ogre Wars took place a long time ago. I don't know! Oh my god. Okay. Sorry. I was just, taken aback, to say the least. Let's continue.
Wonderful.
Busy making candles. Because me and Mary Margaret just sold them all. You're not losing the convent. You're not going anywhere.
Leroy? The hell are you doing, bro?
How could you tell Astrid that we sold all those candles?
Yeah.
That's $5,000. Oh my god, you like her. She is a nun, Leroy. Could you possibly pick anyone any less available?
At the end of the day, you know.
Okay, let's do it.
Do what?
Tomorrow night.
Oh,
after
right.
we drop off the dust, we'll run off together. It's the least I could do after all your help.
Tell her the truth.
Oh, this boat is late.
I can only think of one thing.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Perfect.
Please don't do it.
I'm not gonna jump.
Oh.
You're not?
No, are you crazy? I can hit someone. You know how much damage I can do? I'm solidly built.
What are you doing up here?
I can't go with you.
Tell her what the fairy told you about losing her wings.
Good dream.
I'm a dwarf, Nova.
She probably doesn't know that.
You belong with the other fairies. Makes us different from any other dwarf and fairy out there.
Our love.
In fairness, you've known each other for a day.
It's a dream. It's grumpy now.
You made it happen.
Literally.
You have no idea.
Ooh. Okay. Oh man. I mean, it was clear that in part was going to happen, but I don't know. It's just until it actually happened, I don't know. It didn't feel real, or it's like I didn't know what direction they were going to go. Like I guess I just didn't expect them to actually arrest him. I guess he wasn't technically an arrest, but you know what I mean. Like I wasn't expecting that to happen, and the implication is that he's under arrest, or at the very least, he's being taken in for questioning. So Dreamy, the dwarf, very interesting. The episode. Shut up, computer. The episode. It was okay. Yeah, it mirrored certain things from even the previous episode with Leroy just straight up lying, as opposed to, you know, telling the truth and everything, and sparing everyone a lot of grief, or at least sparing himself, Astrid, and Mary some grief. But yeah. Anyway, let's get into the good aspects of this episode. Yeah, there are some very interesting ones. So to start with, the fairies. More specifically, Nova. She is adorable, first of all. Both her and Astrid, it's like, you know, in both her forms, she is adorable. Clumsy, like nobody's business, but adorable. And so she's my first real favorite part. It's like, the fairies, but primarily her. And then, of course, the second favorite part of this episode, not in any particular order, would be Dreamy, a.k.a. Grumpy, a.k.a. Leroy. And I keep getting the image in my mind of when he hatched, just like that gigantic grin on his face. And it's probably just because up until that point we hadn't really seen him smile truly. Like, he might have had a grin, but he's never like open mouth smiled, and it was not off-putting, just strange, very strange. And oh my god, he was so naive in his, as his early form, as his youthful form, apparently only being like a year old at the point of the chunk of the backstory. And I liked him as Dreamy. I do think that the character Grumpy, as he is now, while what brought him to become Grumpy is tragic and sad, I do prefer that personality overall, because Dreamy, he wasn't one-dimensional before all that happened, but it goes along with the name. He was a dreamer. Like, he dreamed of great things, and he wanted to do all those amazing things. It's like he was the one who could fall in love of all the dwarves. And yeah, I don't know. It just, maybe it's not so much that I don't... I'm getting a little bit confused. Basically, like I said, I like Dreamy, but Grumpy is the superior personality, at least complexity-wise. There's a lot more going on in the head of Grumpy whenever we see him, and obviously of Leroy. But one thing about it is Leroy actually... there's still sparks of Dreamy in there. And even for Grumpy, I'm sure that there may be some sparks of Dreamy still in there. It's like, how he was before. But, I mean, he changed enough that he actually got a new name. I was a little bit... well, actually, no, I'll hold on to that. The whole name thing, I will hold on to that until the end. I'm going to write it down here real fast so I don't forget. But I will come back to that. It's a slight annoyance, unfortunately. But moving on from there with, Leroy / Dreamy / Grumpy. The dwarves in general, being introduced to how they come about, was interesting. Weird, but interesting. I would definitely consider that a favorite part because it reveals to us, I mean, just how they come about, how the 7 dwarves, or at the time 8 dwarves, were born, basically. So yeah, I did find that really interesting. So yeah, the dwarves were a favorite part. The next favorite part is the connection of Miner's Day to, obviously, the... Not fairy godmother, but the fairy known as Nova coming to get the fairy dust. And I don't know what the fairies trade in return. Maybe it's just part of what the dwarves do, and they don't really get anything from the fairies. But when you connect it with the miners and the nuns would trade. Actually, I guess it kind of reversed it, because the nuns would give the coal miners... Nope, wait, there was a trade. I apologize, it is past midnight while I'm doing this, so I'm very tired and very loopy. But yeah, there was the trade there, so that does raise the question, did the fairies actually trade anything with the dwarves in order to get the the fairy dust. I don't know. Like, are they the ones that create the eggs? Which is another thing I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, it's very strange. That does perplex me a little bit, but I do like the parallel there again between Miner's Day and that exchange, if one exists, with the dwarves and the fairies. Now, probably my biggest surprise of all, and possibly my favorite part of this entire episode, Belle! Belle showing up out of nowhere. And it just raises more questions for me, her actually being there. So, obviously, she's the one who informed Dreamy of what he was feeling, the fact that he was in love. I'm surprised that they didn't say he was lovesick. Maybe she did, actually. I don't think she said that he was lovesick, just that he was in love. But that would make sense given, like, I wish they had used that line since, you know, he couldn't eat. He says he couldn't sleep. But when would he have slept, since that was the same day? Anyway, yeah, I do wish they had used the word lovesick, or the phrase lovesick, I guess. I can't remember if it's one word or not. Because I feel like that would have been a bit more accurate. But overall, regardless, Belle being there, holy crap. And I am going to come back to the questions I have pertaining to her, because it's really the only questions I can think of regarding this episode as a whole. Just regarding her. Anyway, moving on. Firefly Hill. That was a beautiful little scene. I really liked it. I love the fact that, because not only was he naive, but I mean, like the other dwarves, he had never really seen the outside. Dreamy, who I'm talking about. So when he thought that, like, the town lights were the fireflies, it's like, it was so adorably naive. And just, even though they were all CGI, just like the fireflies showing up, it was a really cute, pretty effect, and it worked well for that little love story. And then the parallel again later in the episode, where not only do we have the candles, but then we had the fireflies appearing as well. I liked the fact that they did that. And there would be one thing I would be curious of. If Henry had been there, which I'm surprised that Henry didn't show up at all in this episode, but since the crickets hadn't been around for a long time up until something changed, had there been fireflies around? I mean, that's not a question that's going to be answered, I can only assume, but could it be something similar? That because things are continuing to change with Emma's presence, in many ways for the worse, or in some ways for the worse at least, could it be that up until that point, the fireflies hadn't been around, and then they came back just like the crickets did? That would be, that's, I'm going to say that's a theory of mine, that the fireflies hadn't been around until then. I mean, we have no indication that they had been up until that point, because they all just suddenly appeared. So why not? But again, I am going to assume that that's not a theory that will even possibly be confirmed or denied throughout the course of this show, because I doubt they're going to touch on the fireflies. But moving on from there, the next thing that really confuses me, it's definitely a favorite part because it involves Mr. Gold. And probably Rumpelstiltskin, since Mr. Gold knows who he is. Or remembers his past. What is the vendetta that Mr. Gold has against the nuns? And quite frankly, if he doesn't like them as tenants, why did he give them the rent anyway? I mean, you could say that, yeah, I mean, money is money. But if he really disliked really dislikes them so much, and he apparently has a reason to dislike them that he doesn't tell us, then why? My additional theory here, and this might be something that's kind of confirmed, but because it seems like, at the very least, with the Astrid and Nova connection, that the nuns might have previously been fairies, and he has something against fairies. I mean, he did make one explode, after all, back in one of the early episodes. Cinderella's fairy godmother, to be more precise. So yeah, I'm curious if that might be the connection. That's because they were fairies. That's my theory anyway. Could be way off, but I guess I'll only find out by continuing to watch the show. Anyway, moving on from there. My final favorite part of this episode, and it's bundled in with the earlier one, Leroy / Dreamy / Grumpy, but Grumpy. The revealing of him getting his new name and his new personality. I know it's not truly a separate person, it's not a separate personality, it's still him, but he has changed so much in the course of that period of time that I can't help but refer to Dreamy and Grumpy as two separate entities. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but hopefully it does. But it's as simple as that, the reveal of his new name. And it was because of what he went through. I mean, if he had still been the same, if he had overall still had the same personality, would he have still been Dreamy? That's a good question. And actually, it's going to go ahead and bring me into my annoyances for this episode, which I haven't really had many in a long time. So the fact that I have several here might be a little bit telling.
Bring it on.
The first annoyance. Let's jump all the way ahead to the end of the episode. The pickaxe when it reveals Grumpy's name. Now, my annoyance here is more of it's because I'm confused. Does a pickaxe determine the name based on the person's personality, their traits? Or is there something sort of like embedded within the pickaxe itself, and just whatever appears is what appears? And the reason I ask that is, it seems like it would have made sense that when Dreamy got his pickaxe back after he returned, that the name would have changed to Grumpy when he grabbed it. That's what I was expecting when he held on to it. I was expecting him to look down at the pickaxe and see that the name had changed. And I feel like that would have been just as, if possibly not a bit more impactful. Because then he really would have been suffering in silence. Like, the others wouldn't have known yet that he no longer had his name of Dreamy. That he was now Grumpy. And it would be something that he would brood over. Obviously, they would learn it in the future outside the episode. But he just would have been so intense, and no one would have known about that change except for him for that time being. Leaving him, again, like I said, to suffer in silence. So yeah, it's an annoyance because it's confusing as to how that works, but also I feel like it could have been done better. Or at least I kind of prefer my way of how they could have done it. just me anyway. Okay, my next annoyance, going back to the beginning, what's with the eggs? is that something that's actually part of, like, dwarf folklore? That they come from eggs? I honestly have no idea. I have no friggin' clue if that's supposed to be part of it or not. I mean, if you look at Tolkien, who obviously is someone who came after most of the fairy tales were written. I mean, there are male and female dwarves. The female dwarves do have beards. But, like the fact that they establish here that the dwarves come from eggs and that their entire life is the mines and working and digging up the diamonds that become fairy dust. It's just... if it is actually part of dwarf folklore, sure. Sure. Okay. But like an additional question attached to that is, why... Not why. Where do the eggs come from? Like, who or what lays the eggs? Where do they come from? And again, that's one possible theory, or maybe just a question of mine, which would be, do the fairies exchange the eggs for the fairy dust? I don't know. Or do dwarves just one day they have to take a massive poop and an egg comes out? I mean, they don't give us anything else to work with here. They don't give us any other information as to where the eggs come from. So, I mean, as stupid as it sounds, that guess is as good as any, really. So I am curious, though, without actually revealing, if they actually do tell us where the eggs come from. Do they tell us where the eggs come from? Because I'm very interested to find that out. And if it's not ever explained, if I can remember, I'll try and look this up and see if it's part of dwarf folklore or anything like that. Because it's strange and it doesn't make sense to me. Which, again, it's past midnight and I'm really tired, so most things don't make sense to me right now. I'm sorry, Meleena. God, I can only imagine all the emotes and snark that's going to be thrown my way for this episode. I apologize from the bottom of my heart. Anyway, my next annoyance. And it's really my final annoyance with this episode. But it's the lie. No, it's not the lie. Leroy lies to Astrid, but Dreamy doesn't just... like, he kind of talks to Nova about the whole situation, but he doesn't tell her fully what the fairy godmother said. And it's... like, tell her, like, you were told that she would lose her wings. And, I mean, it was clear that he was kind of on this course of, like, you know, he wants her to be happy, which was, I hate that whole idea outside of the scope of just this show, because, like, people say, I just want them to be happy, when obviously they're making everyone miserable. Parallel to David. Anyway. But why didn't he bring that up? Why didn't he tell her what the fairy godmother told him that would happen? It's... if after he told her, and she still said, I don't care if I lose my wings, I feel like that might have convinced him. Or maybe he was just so hell-bent on making sure that they kept the status quo that it wouldn't have mattered. Maybe it wouldn't have. I don't know. It just... ugh. I hate it when someone isn't fully honest, especially when it's someone you care about. And actually that does bring up one final annoyance. I'm sorry, Meleena. And I know that, like there's the whole love at first sight thing. People fall in love very quickly in fairy tales. But they knew each other not even a full day. Not even a full day. Like, they met once. Dreamy was love-struck. She invited him to go see the fireflies, which obviously he picked up on later after he was told by Belle. But, I mean, other than just him being sort of magically inclined toward her, which maybe that's it, because it was her fairy dust that fell and had him hatch early. And he apparently saw her face in a dream, or before he hatched. I don't know, maybe it's meant to be that way. It's like it's love brought together by magic. But of course we know, if that's the case, that all magic comes with a price. So yeah, it's the final annoyance there is just the hideously fast falling in love time span. Like, we've seen movies, we've seen fairy tales where it's bad, but there's usually at least more than like 10 minutes of interaction before they fall in love, usually. Oh yeah, it's weird. Needless to say, this episode was okay. I mean, it was a charming episode overall. It was very interesting to see the backstory to what made Grumpy become who he is, his lost love, which I honestly didn't think I would find out for a long time. But it just wasn't as good. Something about it just didn't feel as solid as previous episodes. And maybe it's because the last few episodes have just been really, really well done. And this is maybe more of the typical quality that the first few episodes of the season had. I don't know. I mean, all seasons have episodes with ups and downs. And maybe it was just the overabundance of cheese coming from Nova and Dreamy that didn't help any. Well, and to that degree also Astrid and Leroy. But yeah, it helped a few things. It did help Mary Margaret. It's like the town is... They may not have forgiven her, but the healing has begun. One of the oldest members of the town there came up to her and lit her candle, and that was a very symbolic gesture, which I really liked. But overall, it almost kind of felt like the whole episode was filler to get to the point of, oh yeah, David might be going to jail. Or is being framed for what happened to Kathryn? I don't know. And I still definitely do think that I'm almost positive he's being framed because, again, the phone records came from Regina's printer, and it kind of looked like that was a document she had opened, a document that she probably created herself, or at the very least edited to include that last call between David and Kathryn. So, there you go. I think he's being framed because it's pretty obvious that he's being framed. Oh, but everyone, I am so sorry that I am so loopy for this review, and I apologize especially to Meleena, my wonderful editor, who I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you write in the review section. But I need to get some sleep. I am going to watch another episode tomorrow after I've gotten some sleep and I've had caffeine, so I am not quite so loopy. But everyone, please let me know your thoughts on this episode, what I've had to say. Leave them in the comments down below. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing what the next episode brings, which let's take a quick look and see what that is. So the next episode is Red-Handed. Red-Handed. So I'm going to guess that that is that has a double meaning, in a sense. So we have Red, aka Red Riding Hood. I'm guessing that's going to be an episode that focuses on her. We might even find out what Snow did that they were talking about several episodes ago. But also, I'm going to guess that whatever fake evidence is being brought up against David will be brought up as saying that he's been caught red-handed. That one might be a little bit too obvious. But anyway, I'm going to shut up now. Everyone, again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for putting up with my loopiness for this episode. I'm just so tired. And I will see you all in the next episode of Discovering Once Upon a Time. See you next time.